and welcome to this week's episode of Hashtag Leadership What's on Your Mind, a podcast to make you stop and think about your leadership journey by inviting amazing guests on and experts in their field. So today we're speaking to Molly and Jessie. How are you both doing?
Yeah, well, thanks.
Good, excellent. So the first for the podcast, we've got a couple on and also two guests. So there's a very apparent reason for that, and I can't wait to have this fully diverse conversation about leadership. I know Molly from growing up and my swimming background, and I had the pleasure of watching your episode, your documentary on the BBC. It was phenomenal. So as I hit the 20-minute timer, for those people who don't know you both, tell them why you're on the podcast, what your background is, and what you both do.
Cool. Shall I take it?
Yeah.
So I'm Jessie, and probably the thing that makes me unusual is the fact that I'm blind. So I have a rare genetic condition that degrades the light-sensitive cells at the back of my eye. And when I say I'm blind, I can't see my hand, which is kind of unusual because Molly and I are both climbers. So the documentary that Stu referenced is called Climbing Blind, and that documents me becoming the first blind person to lead the Old Man of Hoy, a big sea stack off the northeast coast of Scotland. So yeah, that's probably who we are.
Yeah, so Molly, just tell us a little bit about your part in all this.
Yeah, so I met Jessie at university, which seems a long time ago now. We're now married, and I'm his climbing partner, I guess. So we both started climbing like when we were teenagers. Obviously met at uni, went climbing together, and then it's just gone from there, I guess.
And I guess the thing that Molly is too modest to say is that my eyesight was always terrible, but when I was at university, I used to be able to see a little bit. And as I've successively lost my sight, Molly's stepped into the role of being my sight guide. So when we're climbing, she'll use like a radio, or maybe if it's short, we'll just shout, and she'll tell me, where the next holds are, where the opportunities to place the safety equipment are as we're going along. It's quite a specialised and extremely exacting role that Molly has to take on there.
Yeah, and again, we said at the start that documentary is going to be linked in this, so people can go and have a look at that and see it for real. But that's one of the reasons why I invited you on, because I see that as a conversation around leadership. So just to stay in sort of context of what we do on the podcast and ask our guests questions, what do you both think when you hear the word leadership? There's no right or wrong answers here, but what do you think of when you hear the term leadership?
So for me, I think there's probably a couple of things. I think leadership is probably most prominent when the situations are pretty adverse. So when everything's going well, I think a person's leadership qualities are less obvious than when everything's going wrong and they're able to. A good leader, in my opinion, is one who's able to stay calm in the most challenging of circumstances, logically assess what the correct course of action is, and kind of communicate that to their team and make sure that everyone has got buy-in. And the example that I'd give is a couple of years before we climbed the Old Man of Hoy, we went on an expedition to Greenland, and that's a really harsh environment, -15 during the day, -30 at night. You're in there for 3 weeks straight, absolutely exhausted, cold, tired, hungry, kind of at your body's lowest ebb. And leadership is in those challenging situations when something goes wrong, like when your anchor fails and 3 of your mates almost fall to their death. Are you able to really, remain calm, assess the situation, and give the appropriate action? That's what leadership is for me.
Awesome. Molly, what do you think?
I think maybe a mindset and attitude, like a positive attitude, like a can-do attitude is really important to bring people along. Obviously, people are hugely important. I think being able to listen, having empathy, being able to understand, people's situations, being able to put yourself in their shoes is also important. then I guess just being open and honest with yourself and everyone else around you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you've both, and again, I'm smiling as you're talking because I can see what you guys are doing on a regular basis and the relationship and the connection you have together, that it very much is great leadership on both your parts as well. And it's amazing to see it and be able to not even be there, but to have these amazing things of the internet and documentaries that we can see this unfolding in front of us. And it's very much linked to what I've seen in the business world of what people are trying to aspire to get to. So both of you, just, I know it's not as relevant, but where do you think there's a point in which your leadership journey started, whether that's your university or before? We talk about self-leadership in this piece sometimes as well. Is there a point in the past where you think your leadership journey started at all?
So I think for me it was, probably back in school actually. I was captain of the swimming team and also out of school. But I don't think I really recognised that as leadership at the time. I then went on to work for Outward Bound actually in Hong Kong. So that's, I guess, taking kids out, like doing outdoor activities. And even then I didn't really recognise it. It was more after that when I went to university. And I was actually taking people out kind of one-on, like climbing. So rock climbing, taking absolute beginners. And obviously there you've got a huge responsibility to keep, them safe. And so I think, it was, university, I guess.
Yeah, awesome. How about you, Jesse?
Very kind of similar. So both Molly and I started climbing when we were very young. I think I led my first route when I was 11, and at the time I didn't really think of that as leadership, but you're taking a huge responsibility there when you're the one who's in charge of all the safety and takes responsibility for keeping your partner off the deck. And then the same when I went to university. Molly and I were both involved in the mountaineering club and took beginner climbers out climbing, and you've got to look after them, and they're looking to you as the one with the experience and knows what to do.
Amazing. So could you tell us a little bit more about the processes that you go through to make this work, for you to lead a route, trad climbing outside in the elements? How does that start from the start? How do you build that trust for you to have that understanding that it's not just a relationship of Molly just telling you what to do, that it is a nurture that you've built over time? Tell us a little bit from your perspective how that has come to what it is now.
Yeah, so I think our relationship is kind of unusual in that it's a very equal partnership, because not all the time, but often I'll be leading. So in climbing terms, what that means is the leader is the person who climbs up first. And when you climb up first, obviously the rope goes down from you, and you have to introduce a level of safety by putting this safety equipment into the rock when the opportunity presents itself. And while Molly is taking responsibility for kind of guiding me to the best of her ability, she can only do so much in terms of what guiding me to holds and features that she can see from the ground. You won't necessarily be able to tell when you're stood at the bottom which is the good bit. It might look like holy Swiss cheese and you've got no idea which is the good hole to put your hand in. That's down to me. So we've developed a really kind of honed communication system for Molly to kind of guide me up the routes based on what she can see, balanced with my experience of being able to feel the rock and be able to place the safety equipment without being able to see it. And I think that the more you know about climbing, that's probably the bit that blows most climbers' minds, is how I can put the safety kit in without being able to look at it. So
yeah, we were saying about the start that obviously I've got a background in a level of climbing, so I totally have that appreciation of the amazingness of that. So yes, Molly, what are you going to say?
Yeah, I think as well, a lot of the routes we climb on the first attempt, so we haven't climbed the route before. Obviously you don't know where the good holes are, you don't know where to place the gear, so I can't say to Jessie, the next hand hole's out right, because I mean, that might be rubbish for all I know. So I only like advise on saying I can see a crack up to the right. So it's more like that. It isn't really like a dictatorship. You know, you need to do this, you need to do that. I advise what I can see, and I guess you make the decision like based on what I've said.
I guess it's quite an unusual situation because both parties have imperfect information. Obviously, I can't see the holes, and from where Molly is, she can't see, and she obviously can't feel the holes either. So both parties have kind of got incomplete information, and you have to really use communication so that the team as a whole has all the information it needs.
Yeah, amazing. So you said that you've built up a complex communication. What does that look like to give somebody an understanding of how you're approaching a problem and problem solving? So
when you're talking about outside climbing, Molly doesn't really say very much, do you? Like, you'll describe the route to me when we're stood at the bottom, and we'll pick out like where there might be opportunities to place the gear, the safety equipment. And then as I go up, she'll kind of direct me to the obvious holes that she can see. But what she can see isn't necessarily good. So it's kind of down to me. She points stuff out, and then I have a good feel of it and work out whether or not I'm going to use it. And that might just be, you know, up and left, or you might use like kind of a clock face system to do, you know, it's out at 10 o'clock, something like that.
Amazing.
A lot of planning and kind of preparation involved as well. Like obviously we didn't just turn up like to the old Man of Hoy and thought, oh yeah, that looks good, let's climb it. You know, we've been climbing years and years. So we've like, there isn't a textbook to say how you guide a blind trad climber, because I'm not sure there is many or any for that matter.
I think you could be writing it.
So it's very much, you know, a learn on the job kind of thing. And then I guess working out what works, what doesn't work, how to adapt, how to improve the systems. Like every climb you do, there's always improvements made. And I guess, well, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so Molly made a really good point there about like the safety equipment. She climbs up second after me and takes all the safety equipment out as she goes. So she can look at it and she can tell me if any of the places I put in were rubbish. And 95% of the time my gear is good. But that's how kind of you learn. Like if I did place a bad one, then like Molly will be able to tell me, and that's what builds confidence in the fact that I can place safe gear.
Amazing. Do you know what, I was going to ask you about that, and I'd love for you to expand on that regards to feedback and reviewing. So how much detail do you go into? We said about planning, and we said about on the job learning and nurturing through that. How much do you do afterwards? And again, these are the things that people potentially don't see. That this is the behind the closed doors that has built up your level of competency over this time. So what level do you go into regards to feedback and reviewing?
I think, yeah, like a reasonable amount of detail, because I guess it's where when things don't go right, or when something, you know, happens that you could learn from. So for example, like we have radios on so we can like communicate to each other. For the first couple of months they worked fine, and then all of a sudden on one route like it cut out. So, and then like for the next few routes you say, all right, so what happens if the radio like cuts out? So you kind of plan at the bottom, then work out like as you're going up. So like they only work in line of sight. I guess a good example of this was on the Old Man of Hoy, where Jesse goes around a corner and he's like I can't see him, like the radio's cut out, he is literally climbing blind. But we had a plan in place beforehand, because I could see that was going to happen. So like I'd measure the rope I'd pay out, so I knew how far he'd gone. You know, there's little things like that I guess come through like experience. I don't know if anything else you want to add.
Yeah, Jesse, I was going to ask you about how did that feel being in there? Because obviously watching the documentary, you know that you go out of line of sight in communication. How did that feel from your point of view, being that exposed and not necessarily climbing exposed, but a loss of communication and feedback, all those things. How did that feel?
I think it's something that I'm very used to be honest. Like, it happens quite regularly.
Yeah.
Said the radios are totally line of sight dependent. So even on a really small crag, like in the Peak District, like 20 meters, you'll pull over the top, line of sight is broken, and the radio cuts out. You can still hear Molly shouting, but the radio's gone. So it's something that happens, a lot. So I don't think it really fazed me that much, to be honest. And we knew, as Molly said, we'd planned ahead and we knew that was going to happen. Well, didn't know, but had a strong suspicion that was going to happen. So
yeah. Amazing. So you've got a climbing wall behind you there. I just want to sort of pick up on what level of, and again, we're talking about leadership, but also encouraging high performance. So we've mentioned about planning, and obviously you've said that you've obviously had that in the current times of the world, as being locked in, and you guys being very explorer based. What has the last 12 months allowed you to focus on? And I know you're probably not the people that are going to sit there and feel sorry for yourselves. What have you allowed yourselves to really kind of develop and hone over this time?
I guess it's the physical training, isn't it? Like, yeah, we would love to be out. That's not possible. You've got to make the most of the situation that presents itself to you. So looked at the areas of my physical climbing that were the weakest and decided to work on those. So for me, that's my absolute maximum finger strength. Can hold on for a really long time, but I find it hard to hold the very smallest holds. So that's something I've been working on.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Excellent. Good. So I would love your thoughts on, and again, to talk that the people who are listening to this podcast are wanting to level up their leadership. They're potentially in more of a corporate role. And obviously this is like other of our guests talking about sleep experts, violinists, having that diverse conversation about leadership. I was really keen to sort of identify the fact of having that sort of telling people what to do all the time is probably not the best thing to be doing. What are your sort of advice and guidance on that support and nurture? Because obviously, Jesse, you're on the receiving end of that. And I think if it wasn't a process that was thought, that you could just be talked at and about do this, do that, do the other to get up this climb. What are your thoughts on that and some of the advice you could give to somebody who's listening to this right now?
So one of the things that I thought about is that often people ask me if I ever get annoyed with Molly, because it's quite a responsibility to guide someone up a climb, because the sequence in which you use the holds is critical, and Molly has to spot that from the ground. And if she gets the wrong sequence, suddenly it just becomes impossible and I'll fall off. And obviously, if that's a competition, then that's game over. So there's quite a heavy responsibility on her there. And I think most people think it would be very easy when Molly makes a mistake for me to get really angry. Oh, you picked the wrong sequence. But you've got to remember that, that is not helpful, and that's not the way to build a teamwork. You might feel it, yeah, sure, but you've got to, have the self-control to never kind of let that out, as it were. You've got to remember that if someone's doing their best, that's all you can expect, all you could ask for.
Awesome. Molly, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, like you say, when you're in, I guess, testing environments or situations, I think just having the confidence to make a decision and to go with that. Because I think the fact that you've made a decision is far better than not making a decision at all.
Yeah, that procrastination piece, isn't it?
Yeah, just having the confidence in yourself just to go for it.
Sometimes in serious environments, time is really critical, and you can't afford the time to procrastinate and to oscillate between two different courses of action. You've got to be able to make your decision quickly and stick to it.
Yeah, especially when you're holding on at one end trying to think, well, it'd be great for you to make a decision right now.
That's one thing that Molly is excellent at. So we go back to the thing I talked about, the sequence. Occasionally, she'll have read the route one way and she thinks I'm going to go A, B, C. And I get there and I go, nope, can't do that. I've got to change sequence. And Molly's excellent at rearranging on the fly and going, right, okay, it's not this way, it's the other way. That's a real skill, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. And that only comes from having that understanding over time, doesn't it? And having that openness and trust of that communication and feedback.
And Molly touched on it earlier about empathy, which is critical because I'm 6'1", Molly's 5'6". We climb in very different ways. So when Molly's reading a route for me, she has to imagine how she would do the route, and then she has to modify it for the fact that I'm climbing the route and I've got a load of extra reach. But if it gets underneath a big overhang, I'm going to be really, really crunched up. I wouldn't climb it the same way that she would.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that. So that's our time. 20 minutes has flown by. I know every time this happens, having amazing people on telling amazing stories. Just quickly, what does the next 6 months, what are you going to be doing once we all start being able to adventure and travel again? What have you got on the cards?
Freedom. It's going to be climbing in the UK, I think, initially, like traveling. Would love to be able to travel, but that doesn't look particularly likely at the moment. So get back out on rock. It's been quite a while since I've been out on rock. So that'll be awesome. And find my level and set some appropriate challenges. So there are a load of climbs throughout the UK that we both want to do. So yeah, get on those. Put some of the physical training we've been doing to good use.
Yeah, excellent. So guys, thank you so much for joining me. So guys, if you're listening to us on your podcast provider, make sure you follow. And I would love every time for people to share your takeaways from each of these episodes. If you're watching us on the YouTube channel, make sure you hit subscribe, hit the bell, and then every Monday at 6 a.m. you get one of my vlogs. And every Wednesday at 6 a.m. you get another amazing guest. So thank you so much, Jessie. Thank you so much, Molly.
Cheers. Thank you.
And I'll see everybody next week. Take care. Bye.